along the side here near the temple and goes underneath, forms the base of the brain. That bone is called the sphenoid bone, right? That's going to be articulating with the occipital bone on the bottom side there. Then we have some bones here on the face. What's this cheekbone? Zygomatic, right? What's it? Where's it fusing in back here? To what bone? Temporal bone, right? It's coming over here and it's making up a part of this lateral wall of the orbital socket. What's making up the floor of the orbital socket? The floor. It's the same bone that's right here. The maxilla, right? The maxilla. And the maxilla is also going to make up part of the medial wall. And then there's another bone there located medially that has a little duct in it. What's that? The lacrimal bone, right? That's the lacrimal, we have a fossa there. Right? Behind the lacrimal bone, we have the ethmoid bone, right? Then, what bone is this? So what makes up the roof of the orbital socket? The roof of the orbital socket? Frontal, right? The frontal. Yeah, all right. This is what bone again?
The nasal.
What bone is this?
Maxilla.
What bone is this?
Mandible.
The mandibular fossa is going to be connecting the mandible back here where there's this little fossa in the temporal bone where that connects there. And then let's take a look at the skull. So we look underneath the skull and we see a hole. What's that hole called?
Magnum foramen.
The magnum foramen, also called the occipital foramen. And it's in which bone? The occipital bone. We see these bumps right next to the occipital foramen. What are those called?
Occipital condyle.
Occipital condyles. What are the occipital condyles going to articulate with?
Atlas.
The C1, also commonly called the atlas, right? And what part of the atlas is it going to articulate with?
The arches.
You can see it's a smooth surface. Hold up that spinal cord. Okay. It's a smooth surface right here. It's going to be articulating with that. What's the name of that? Is it a fossa? Is that a depression? Oh.
Transverse.
No, that's a superior articulating facet, right? The facet's a smooth surface, articulating surface. That's a superior articulating facet. All right. So then we have the superior articulating facet contacting these occipital condyles. What's the name of that joint? It's got part of the Atlantic Ocean's name in it.
Articulating.
Atlanto-occipital joint, right? The what's going to be traveling through that foramen magnum? Not the vertebrae, but the spinal cord, right? Spinal cord and blood vessels. Then what makes up the anterior part of the bony roof of the mouth?
Palate.
No, the anterior.
The front.
The what? Maxilla. And the posterior?
The palatine.
Palatine bones, right. And then, okay. What bone is this on the inside?
Solotersica.
What bone? Sphenoid bone, right? The sphenoid bone. And then that region there is called the sella turcica. What's sitting in that sella turcica?
Pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland, right? And you can see how it looks like a evil bat or butterfly there. And okay, so let's first move over here. So we have the vertebral column. What are the what's on top here? The vertebral column. They're called the cervical, right? Cervical. How many of them do we have? Seven, right? You count down 7. You feel this big bump over here. You feel down the back of your neck. You feel that big bump. That's the prominence. That's the prominent processes of the 7 cervical vertebrae that you feel there in the back of your neck. Then what's going to articulate with that one?
The thorax.
Thoracic vertebrae. How many of them do we have? 12. What's the special feature of the thoracic vertebrae?
They combine with the ribs.
Yeah, they're articulating with the ribs, right? Then what do we have after the thoracic?
Lumbar.
The lumbar vertebrae, and then after the lumbar,
Sacrum.
sacral, and then the
Coccygeal.
coccygeal, right? And then what's special about those two?
They're fused.
They're fused, right? What's in between these vertebrae?
Inter.
No, intervertebral disc.
Intervertebral disc,
I know
right?
you guys know.
Intervertebral disc. What's that tough membrane called?
Nucleus pulposus.
The tough membrane.
Annulus.
Annulus, right?
Uh,
And then what's inside of the intervertebral disc?
Nucleus pulposus.
The nucleus pulposus, that elastic gelatinous stuff in there. So if you have a rupture of an intervertebral disc, what do you have?
Herniated.
Herniated disc, right? And if you have a bulge, what do you have? A slip disc. That bulge of the annulus is going to be a slip disc then, right? These intervertebral discs are going to be in between what part of the vertebrae?
The body.
The vertebral body, also called the centrum, right? Then let's take a look at some of these vertebrae. What type of vertebrae is this?
Cervical.
Cervical. How could you tell?
Spinous process.
The bifurcated spinous process. We see how it's split on top. It's bifurcated. And then what about the foramen?
It's got a large foramen.
It's got a large foramen. How come it has a large
Because
foramen?
the spinal cord is bigger as when you
Spinal cord's getting bigger as we go up, right? And then what about the bottom?
It's a little
This
centrum.
little centrum, right? Little vertebral body or centrum. What about off to the sides? Transverse transverse foramen, right? They're holes, right? Transverse foramens, and that's are we going to see those in the thoracic or lumbar vertebrae?
No.
No, only in the cervical vertebrae, right? What's going to be passing through them?
Blood vessels.
Blood vessels going up, right? Okay, then which one is this?
Lumbar. Oh no, thoracic. Because it's got a heart.
Is it?
No, it's not heart. It's lumbar.
Lumbar, right? This is going to be a lumbar. And look at the size of that vertebral body, how it differs in the size of that foramen, how it's smaller. Then let's go to. Sorry, every time we meet, we have less bones. And we got one left. All right. Which one's this? The thoracic. We can tell that because of these very stout processes, right, in the shape of a heart, sort of. If your heart were made out of bone and thoracic vertebrae shape, then it would have these stout processes here. And what are these stout processes called? These off to the side called the transverse processes, right? And what's going to articulate here? The ribs, right? Good. Okay. Which type of vertebrae is this?
The atlas.
Yeah, it's the atlas, which is a type of cervical vertebrae, right? How could you tell it's the atlas?
Huge foramen.
It's got two little foramen on the side.
Yeah, so do all the other cervical ones. How could you tell this was the atlas?
It's huge.
It doesn't have a dens. Only one cervical vertebrae does have a dens, but how could you tell this is the
It
atlas?
doesn't have a spinal process.
It doesn't have that centrum, right? That vertebral body that's missing off of this one. All right, let's and this one. What's this one called?
Dens of axis.
This is the
C2.
C2, which is the axis, right? And we can tell it's the axis because it has a large prominent dens. And where's that dens located?
In between.
It's located on what structure? What would be here if we cut the dens off? If it
The
wasn't
body.
the vertebral, body or the centrum, right? So that dens is coming up, and then these two are going to come together like this, and then we're going to have a ligament, this very tough ligament that's going to go around this dens and hope to hold this in place to make this a stable joint. What's the name of that ligament? Transverse ligament, right? Again, if we have a slippage of that atlanto-occipital joint, then what can happen is the dens can move in towards the spinal cord or the medulla, depending on the severity of the injury. And if this moves into the spinal cord, what's the side effect of that?
Paralysis.
Paralysis. It moves into the medulla. What's the side effect of that? Death, right? Okay. We can visualize that joint here and here. So again, what are these bumps that it's articulating with?
As it will come